So it's a pleasure to be here in these splendid facilities. Before starting, I would like to call your attention to the backdrop we chose for this presentation. And I'm referring, of course, to this beautiful bridge there. It's a reminder that we would not be here if a number of decades ago somebody had not built that bridge. We are not, islands cannot exist without connections with the rest of the world. And it's so exciting to think that somebody actually, many people were interested in devoting innovation, creativity, energy to building bridges as opposed to building walls. So we felt it was a very appropriate backdrop for presenting the 11th edition of the report. May I use this ticker? 11th edition, okay? So some credibility, some stability in the model. This year, we have 126 countries included in the report. So the great majority of world population and world GDP is covered by the report. And that's a very important message we wanted to have as part of GII. This is a global report. We want the report to have something to say, not just for the advanced countries who have all the data you can think of, but for the middle income and even for the poorest countries who have something to expect from innovation. And the philosophy behind the report is clearly, and Francis Gurry underlined that already, that innovation is a key driver in economic growth. So this has not changed, and nothing in our analysis has taken us away from that fundamental hypothesis. After 11 years of publication, the report has become this global benchmark we wanted it to be. It is the global reference on benchmarking innovation worldwide, and of course, we are very happy about that. I will insist on the fact that this is not an academic report. It is a tool for action. The reason why it includes rankings, and we believe very much in the value of rankings, is to encourage, to call the attention of the decision makers, the investors, the politicians, but also every single citizen, that is all of us, who has stakes in innovation. And action can take place at all these levels. It can be action by governments, action by business, action by civil society. We want the report to inform the discussions around innovation between these various components of society. And the uniqueness, the fundamental uniqueness in this index, the Global Innovation Index, is its holistic nature. That is, we don't look at one particular aspect of innovation. We try to combine all aspects of innovation. So across the pillars of the model, we're going to look at, of course, patents, trademarks, because they are one of the indicators, but also at the condition under which you can develop innovation. Do you have to be politically incorrect to be an innovator? Okay, there's no measure of that, but we have proxies to assume what is the degree of freedom that people have to develop new ideas. What is the degree of collaboration that exists between the public sector, the private sector, academia, ordinary citizens? All those are conditions for success in innovation. And this is why the model is based on these 7 pillars. And I will not get into a description of the model itself, just to flag the fact that it has an input side. On the input side, basically, you measure the efforts made by the main players. Okay? How much investment is being put towards innovation, how many education is being created. On the output side, you see, is that successful? Okay? What are the innovative products that this national economy or that other economy produce? And by combining the input and the output side, we have a global index, and then we can rank countries. It's as simple as it can get. You've heard from Francis and Sumitra that this would not exist if it had not been this cooperative endeavor. So it's another opportunity to thank our sponsors and partners. Let me say as an additional word of general introduction to the report that we have reasons to be optimistic. If we look at the decade going from 96 to the 2 decades, 96 to 2016, we see that basically the efforts made towards innovation have increased steadily. And this is a worldwide statement. The attention given to innovation has increased. It would be very difficult to find anyone anywhere around the world who would say that innovation is not important for economic growth, that it's not important for international competitiveness. It's still worth seeing whether people would say innovation is key for reducing inequalities. But we are giving additional exciting elements to also address these type of questions. The fact is that when we look at this kind of evolution, actually the amount of resources devoted to research and development, to science, to what's behind innovation has been increasing steadily. At times, there have been gaps, there have been crises. At times, public investment has been growing faster than private investment, or vice versa. Right now, we have reasons to worry about the plateauing of these expenses, but altogether, these 20 years that we've seen, that we can now look at with some hindsight, have been good years for innovation. So we have reasons to be optimistic. It's not a 2-year trend. It's something very fundamental that is driving the world economy today. So what does it mean in 2018 when we look at the data? And this have to do with the rankings. And this is what the press and the media tomorrow will be raging about. And this is what it looks like. So we use batteries because the theme is energy. I will come back and you will hear from Sumitra about it. The rankings are in the blue battery. So we have there Switzerland, Netherlands. I will not go through the list. We have a number of switches. That is, the Netherlands has been progressing spectacularly by 4 ranks, which is quite remarkable for one of the top 10 countries. The US has moved down 2 ranks. But altogether, we know where the champions are. If we look at the input versus output side, we see a number of differences. We see, for instance, that Singapore is the #1 in the world in inputs and is nowhere to be seen in the top 10 on outputs. So there's clearly a discrepancy there, and Singapore is not the only example where countries sometimes are not receiving the full reward of the efforts they are putting in innovation. So that's one of the areas we like to encourage people to explore further. And this is why the differentiation between the input and the output side of the model is important. And I'm sure the discussion later on will bring us back to that. So one question is, how does the world look in that respect? Well, again, as mentioned before, we have reasons to be optimistic if we look at the last few decades. We also have reasons to be optimistic if we look at the leadership per regions. We have encouraging signs everywhere. We have dynamic examples of beautiful things happening around innovation in all parts of the world. So I will not paraphrase the whole map and say who is leading in that region or another region, but clearly, depending on the continent, there will be sources of inspiration, not just for other countries in a particular region trying to see who is our champion, okay? So if you're in Latin America, I would say, what is Chile doing right that I could improve in my own country? But also worldwide. So what something like GII encourages is people in one region to try and look at other regions and find inspiration there. Now, if we look regionally, of course, the big story is China. And you will hear again about China from Sumitra in a minute, because it's a fascinating example where also there are sources of inspiration. It would be too easy to say, oh yes, but China is so big, China is so special, we cannot dream of imitating what is happening there. No, GII says the opposite. There are lessons to be drawn. Sometimes they need to be adapted. Sometimes they need to be recreated. But there are sources of inspiration that can be taken from anywhere in the world. And big countries can also draw lessons from smaller economies. That's also part of the game. If So we have reasons to be optimistic. As an old friend of mine who was an ambassador to the UN here in New York from a Latin American country, which I will not name, he said, you know, the difference between pessimist and optimist is a thin one. In my country, and again, I will not name the country, the optimist is the one who says, we're going to eat dirt again today. And the pessimist is the one who is afraid there won't be enough for everybody. So everything is relative. But again, looking at the world map, we are very encouraged. We think that indeed it is exciting. So the last slide I want to comment is the same rankings, not just at the level of regions, but the level of income groups. And clearly, we have a strong correlation between wealth and innovation performance. The rich countries are performing better in the GII than the poor countries. We cannot deny that. Does it mean that we have a growing divide? Actually, we have signs showing that in many respects, the picture, the landscape is changing. And one of the most fascinating areas or groups of countries within which exciting change is taking place is the middle-income countries. This is where you find China, but this is also where the examples given by Malaysia, by Thailand, in Asia, by Vietnam, etc., are seen in comparison with the similarly exciting example taken from other continents, the things that fascinate us. We want to understand better about what is making innovation palatable, exciting in those countries. It's generally supported by a leadership vision. That is, somebody at the top of government has to say innovation is critically important, it's part of our national strategy, but that's far from sufficient. If the business sector, if the population do not believe that this is credible, that it's going to improve their ways of life and their quality of life, it's not going to work. So again, one of the overall messages of the report this year is optimism, moderate optimism, because we have clearly other reasons to worry about the roads that the world economy may take. But again, if we focus on bridges rather than on walls, we'll stimulate innovation and we'll have more good news for you next year and the years after that. Thank you.